Buried beneath one of the most investigated ranches on Earth, ground-penetrating radar picked up something that should not have been there. A massive, dome-shaped structure, hidden underground, sitting in a location that had already produced years of unexplained readings. The team dug. What happened next became one of the most talked about moments in the show's history, and it is still debated by scientists, skeptics, and viewers today. This is the true, documented story of what actually happened when investigators at Skinwalker Ranch finally broke ground, told the way history deserves to be told. Not by repeating every dramatic claim as confirmed fact, but by separating what was actually recorded, what was interpreted, and what remains, to this day, entirely unproven. Before we go underground, we need to understand the ground itself, because the land beneath Skinwalker Ranch did not become mysterious the moment cameras arrived. It carried meaning long before that. The ranch sits in the Uinta Basin of northeastern Utah, bordered by the Uinta and Ouray Indian Reservation, land historically associated with the Ute people. This is verified, documented fact. The popular name attached to the ranch borrows from Navajo tradition, specifically the concept of Yi-Nald-Lushi, a feared shape-shifting figure in Navajo spiritual belief. It is worth being precise here, because the ranch itself sits primarily on land connected to the Ute tribe, not the Navajo Nation. And Ute oral tradition in the region carries its own separate stories about the land and its unexplained qualities. Two distinct cultural traditions have often been blended together under one commercial name, and that blending is itself part of this story's history, not just a footnote to it. For most of the 20th century, this was simply a working cattle ranch, unremarkable to outsiders. That changed in 1994 when Terry and Gwen Sherman purchased the property. Within 2 years, the family began describing disturbing experiences, unexplained animal deaths, strange lights, and encounters they said defied rational explanation. These are reported claims made directly by the family, and they have never been independently verified through confirmed physical evidence. By 1996, the Shermans sold the ranch to aerospace entrepreneur Robert Bigelow, who founded a private research organization called the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS, to formally investigate the property using cameras, sensors, and trained personnel. This multi-year investigation is verified fact. What it actually proved remains contested, and its findings were later compiled in the 2005 book Hunt for the Skinwalker, written by journalist George Knapp and biochemist Colm Kelleher, one of the lead field investigators. That book remains testimony and recollection, not peer-reviewed science. In 2016, Bigelow sold the ranch to Utah real estate developer Brandon Fugal through his company Adamantium Real Estate for a reported $4.5 million. Fugal initially kept his ownership private. In 2020, he went public, becoming the executive producer and an on-screen presence for a new History Channel series called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. That series is where our story underground truly begins. From its very first season, the show made clear that this would not simply be a program about lights in the sky. According to the show's own official episode descriptions, one of the season's central storylines followed the team's, quote, quest to understand what may lie beneath Skinwalker Ranch, unquote. This is a direct documented element of the program's structure, confirmed through the network's own released episode summaries. The investigators, led by principal investigator Eric Ebard and astrophysicist Travis Taylor, spent extended time surveying specific locations on the property using scientific instrumentation, including ground-penetrating radar, thermal cameras, and radio frequency monitoring equipment. Travis Taylor is a real and credentialed figure worth understanding on his own terms. He holds a doctorate in optical science and engineering, has published in technical scientific fields, and previously served as a scientific advisor connected to the government-funded Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Applications Program, the same Pentagon-linked initiative, later reported by the New York Times in 2017, to have financial ties to research associated with Skinwalker Ranch. His presence on the investigation team gave the production a layer of scientific credibility that earlier, more informal accounts of the ranch never had. It is important to state clearly, however, that Taylor's own public comments in interviews describe his personal belief that some of what he has observed at the ranch is genuinely anomalous and worthy of further study. That is a personal, professional opinion from a credentialed scientist. It is not on its own peer-reviewed confirmation of anything supernatural. According to the show's official production materials and public episode descriptions, advanced testing conducted by the team eventually detected what were described as strange anomalies underground in a specific area of the property. Ground-penetrating radar readings reportedly indicated the presence of a large dome-shaped structure beneath the surface, positioned in a location that had already produced years of reported electromagnetic and visual anomalies, an area the team came to refer to as the Triangle. For years, according to the show's narrative, ranch owner Brandon Fugel had been reluctant to authorize any actual excavation at this specific site. Digging into unexplained ground, especially land already carrying decades of reported strangeness, was treated within the show as a significant, even risky, decision. Eventually, according to official episode summaries, Fugel gave the team permission to dig. This moment was presented both by the network and by the investigators themselves as one of the most significant turning points in the show's run, a moment where instrument readings and years of buildup would finally be tested against physical excavation. Here is where we have to be especially careful and precise, because this is exactly the point in the story where dramatic television and framing and confirmed historical fact begin to diverge. What is documented is this. The team did receive permission to dig. The team did conduct excavation work at the site where radar anomalies had been detected. Ground-penetrating radar data, as presented on the program, did suggest the presence of a large, buried, dome-shaped formation. These are documented elements of the production, confirmed through the network's own released materials and episode descriptions. What remains unverified is what that structure actually was. If in fact a distinct man-made or otherwise anomalous structure was conclusively confirmed at all. As of the most recent publicly available information, no peer-reviewed scientific paper has been published presenting independently verified data from this excavation or from any other investigation conducted at Skinwalker Ranch. The NIDS investigation, decades earlier, produced no public, peer-reviewed journal findings either. The ASAP program's associated research reports, some of which have been released in partially redacted form through Freedom of Information Act requests and analyzed by journalists, address unidentified aerial phenomena broadly, but they do not constitute confirmed, peer-reviewed science specifically validating what was found beneath Skinwalker Ranch. There is also a structural reality worth naming directly, because it matters for how we understand everything the show presents. The secret of Skinwalker Ranch is, at its core, a produced reality television program created for entertainment and commercial viewership. Multiple scientists, skeptics, and researchers outside the production have publicly raised concerns that the series presents inconclusive or ambiguous instrument readings using dramatic editing. Suspenseful pacing and framing techniques common to reality television, techniques that can make uncertain data appear far more conclusive to a home viewer than it would appear to an independent scientist reviewing the same raw readings without narration or music. This criticism does not mean the ground-penetrating radar readings were fabricated, and it does not mean nothing unusual was ever detected underground. It means that television production incentives and independent scientific verification are two fundamentally different things. So, what actually happened when they reached the bottom of that excavation? According to the show's own presentation, the dig revealed subsurface material and formations consistent with the radar anomalies detected earlier, along with ongoing readings that the team described on camera as unusual. The specific nature of what was ultimately confirmed at that site, and whether it represents a naturally occurring geological formation, a previously unknown but ordinary buried structure, or something the team genuinely could not explain, has not been settled through any independent, peer-reviewed process outside the television production itself. This is the point where the hook of this story, they finally reach the bottom, has to be understood for what it actually is. It is a dramatic framing device built for engagement, not a literal, confirmed historical outcome. No credible, independently verified account describes the team encountering something that caused them documented harm or catastrophe as a direct result of the dig. What we do have, honestly, is a team that spent years building anticipation around a single buried anomaly, finally excavated it on camera, and produced footage and readings that remain, to date, unresolved by independent science. Let us step back now and look at the people who actually shaped this specific chapter of the ranch's history. Brandon Fugal, the current owner, made the final call to authorize the excavation after years of hesitation, a decision the show presents as one of the most consequential of his ownership. His willingness to eventually allow digging, after publicly acknowledging reluctance for so long, reflects a genuine tension between protecting the land and pursuing answers. One of the more human elements of this entire story. Eric Bard, the show's principal investigator, led much of the technical survey work that identified the underground anomaly in the first place. Applying structured instrumentation to a site with decades of prior, less formal reports attached to it. Travis Taylor brought genuine scientific credentials and prior government research experience to the investigation, giving the excavation storyline a level of technical framing that distinguishes it from earlier, purely anecdotal accounts of the ranch from the 1990s. And behind all of them stands the long-documented history that made this specific dig feel significant to begin with. The Sherman family's original reports in the 1990s, the NIDS investigation Robert Bigelow funded starting in 1996, the 2005 book that introduced the ranch to a mass audience, and the 2017 New York Times reporting that connected Bigelow's aerospace company to a real Pentagon program studying unidentified aerial phenomena. Without that 3-decade foundation, a radar anomaly and a hole in the ground would simply be a hole in the ground. With it, the same excavation became a nationally watched television event. What does this specific chapter, the underground dig, actually tell us? Once we separate the marketing from the record, it tells us that Skinwalker Ranch's most dramatic modern moments are almost always built on a real foundation, real radar equipment, real credentialed scientists, a real decision by a real landowner, layered underneath entertainment framing designed to maximize suspense. It tells us that even genuinely trained scientists can hold sincere personal beliefs about anomalous phenomena, while that belief still falls short of the independent, peer-reviewed confirmation that separates a compelling television moment from settled historical fact. And it tells us something about audiences too, that we are drawn not just to answers, but to the anticipation of an answer. The years of buildup toward a single dig, a single reading, a single moment when the shovel finally hits something unexpected. It also reinforces a criticism that deserves to remain part of this record. The commercial use of the term skinwalker, drawn from sacred Navajo tradition and applied to land connected primarily to the Ute people, continues throughout this excavation storyline exactly as it has throughout the ranch's entire modern history. And Native scholars and writers have continued to raise legitimate concern about a spiritually significant term being used to brand a television franchise built around buried treasure style suspense. It is also worth understanding, briefly, why ground-penetrating radar readings generate so much excitement and so much confusion at once, since this single piece of technology sits at the center of the underground claim. The tool works by sending electromagnetic pulses into the earth and measuring how they reflect back based on changes in soil density, moisture, and buried material. It is a legitimate, widely used scientific and archaeological instrument. What it produces is not a photograph, but a pattern of reflected signal strength that trained specialists then interpret, and that interpretation can vary considerably. A dense clay deposit, a natural rock formation, an old buried structure from decades of prior ranch use, or a genuine anomaly can all produce readings that look intriguing on a screen before further excavation or laboratory analysis confirms what they actually are. This is exactly why responsible researchers describe radar anomalies as leads worth investigating further, not as confirmed discoveries in themselves, and it is exactly why a truly independent verification involving a separate team with no creative or financial stake in the outcome has not yet occurred here. At the same time, fairness requires acknowledging the other side of this tension honestly. Genuine scientists, including Travis Taylor, have staked real professional reputations on stating publicly that they believe some of what has been recorded at the ranch defies conventional explanation. Robert Bigelow, a serious aerospace entrepreneur who built a real functioning space technology company, was willing to spend years and substantial personal wealth funding formal investigation rather than dismissing the Sherman family's claims outright. A real United States government program, however limited in scope, did find the subject credible enough to include in funded research. These are not fringe actors easily dismissed as attention seekers. They represent a genuine, if contested, thread within serious scientific and defense research communities that has taken unexplained aerial ground-based phenomena seriously enough to study it, even without reaching definitive conclusions. This tension between sincere, credentialed investigators on one side and the structural incentives of commercial television and the total absence of independent peer review on the other is not a flaw in this story. It is the actual substance of it. So where does that leave the underground dig itself, viewed now with the full weight of this context? It leaves us with a documented excavation, conducted by a mix of credentialed scientists and television producers, at a site chosen because of genuine, if scientifically ambiguous, radar readings, following literal decades of prior testimony from multiple owners and researchers about the same general area of the property. It leaves us with footage presented to millions of viewers, framed for maximum suspense, describing findings that remain to this day without independent, peer-reviewed confirmation. And it leaves us with a landowner who, after years of caution, made a real decision to allow that excavation to happen, fully aware that whatever was found or was not found would become part of a permanent and permanently debated historical record. That is the real ending to this chapter. Less dramatic than the title promised, but far more historically honest, and in its own way, still genuinely remarkable. A radar reading, a hesitant landowner, a credentialed scientist willing to say publicly that he believes something is there, and a hole in the ground that, decades into this story, still has not given up a single confirmed answer. And maybe that is the real discovery here. Not what was buried beneath the ranch, but how far a real piece of land, a real family's testimony, and one real unresolved radar anomaly can travel once the cameras start rolling.